I sat next to a woman on the train today. She was angry that I took the seat next to her, because she wanted the two seats to be just for her. As long as I was around, she wouldn't stop muttering to herself that she just wanted to sit alone, blah blah blah. Even though I wanted to tell her that it was public transportation and she needed to get used to it, I kept my mouth shut. A couple of minutes later, a large woman enters our carriage with a large bag. She's breathing heavily as she walks towards me, so I give her a seat, throwing a grin at the disgruntled lady who didn't want me to sit next to her. It was nice to see how her head almost burst with anger when she was pinned by the buttocks and bag of a large woman for the rest of the trip. A few years ago, I was in a movie theater, watching some kind of action movie, in my opinion, with Jean-Claude Van Damme. In front of me were guys about 16 or so years old, and in front of them were younger children, about 12 years old. I was alone. My wife hates such films. I quickly noticed that the older guys were bullying the younger ones, kicking the seat backs, throwing popcorn at them, spitting, and all that sort of stuff. The cinema was full, so the children had nowhere to move. As a result, one of these teenage cretins leans forward and, I think, taps the boy in the ear. When he turns around to look, the older one says to him, "Is there a problem, asshole?" His friend laughs. After that, the guy who snapped leans back in his seat, and I swing and give him a decent slap on the back of the head, from which he bumps his head into his friend's head. They both turn around, ready to jump up from their seats, and they stop when they see me. I'm under 190 inches tall and weigh 100 kilograms. I get up and say, "Is there a problem, you fuckers?" They look at each other and turn back. "Well, no," I tell them. "Since you're sitting here, I'll behave with you the same way you behave with those guys in front of you." After that, they shuffled out of the hall. The younger guys turned around and said, "Thank you, sir." About a year ago, I worked as the manager of a large nightclub. I wasn't wearing a uniform, but I had a walkie-talkie, and I was in charge of security. The club had a decent smoking area that faced the street. So one evening we were packed, and I was doing my usual inspection to make sure there were no problems, but the smoking area was so crowded that it was impossible to get in, so I went outside, from where I could easily explore the area. There's a guy who stares down at me, then calls me closer and starts yelling at me for no reason. "Pieces of shit, like you can't even enter this club." Of course, he had no idea that I was working as a manager here, but I didn't want the guards to start a fight with him right inside. The guy kept saying he was going to kick my ass and everything, and he was obviously trying to look macho in front of someone. I supported him and offered to come out to me so that there would be a place to swing. He puts down his glass, takes off his jacket, and runs outside. But as soon as he walked out the door, I immediately went into the club and told the guards not to let him back in. The look on his face when he realized that I was running the place was priceless. And then when it dawned on him that the way to the club was closed to him, he fucked up even more. We have never kicked out a visitor so badly and simply. I work in a local theater, and we come across a lot of rude, terrible women, mothers of dancers from ballet studios. One day, such a person calls us, wants to go to a ballet performance, the seats for which are practically sold out. The performance is already tomorrow, and ticket sales started as much as 4 months ago. For the next 5 minutes, I only heard insults from her, even though she delayed buying tickets herself. She complained, they say. Why should she buy tickets for her children's performance? She complained that we needed to make the hall bigger. It can accommodate almost 500 people, and then put me on hold to call 3 of her relatives and find out if tickets were needed for them. An absolutely terrible woman. The seats I was going to sell her were the only ones left in the theater, and they were good. While I'm on hold, the grandmother of one of the ballerinas comes up to the checkout and asks if we have any more seats. She said, "I was in the hospital, so I couldn't buy them earlier. I'll understand if the tickets are already sold out." I turned on the background music of Waiting on the Bell and sold this old lady the last seats for the ballet, and also gave her and her granddaughter a booklet with an invitation to our next dance season so that she would know exactly when the important events would be. In response, I heard a lot of thanks from her. Now she is our regular customer and brings her grandchildren to the performances. 2 minutes after the old lady left, the fool on the phone finally takes me off hold and says she needs the remaining seats, to which I reply, "Sorry, unfortunately, while I was on hold, all the tickets were sold out. Good luck next year. Is there anything else I can do?" She was choking with rage on the other end of the line. It was awesome. I'm a girl. I went to a bar with friends to have a beer. Over time, our company grew bigger and bigger. Soon I was practically separated from my fiancé. I was introduced to a guy. Let's call him Bob. The acquaintance was something like this. "Bob, this is Bob." To which he responds, Every girl with your name I've met is a whore and a slut. Well, I'm not really offended by gratuitous insults, so I just decided that it was an unsuccessful drunken joke, or he had recently broken up with a girl with the same name, so I just said, well, okay, I'm neither one nor the other anyway. Nice to meet you, Bob, and shook his hand. He spent the rest of the evening walking up to the bar, then coming back and giving me a sidelong glance. For some reason, he didn't like me, and the feeling became mutual. I decided that the best thing to do in this situation was to ignore him. There was clearly something wrong with him. So, a few hours later, I was sitting next to his girlfriend, chatting and giggling merrily. Suddenly, he puts his elbows on the table between us and looks at me as if I offended him in some way. I just continued the conversation, ignoring him. Then he puts his nasty face close to mine and says, "So, are you a whore?" My temper, and alcohol, got the better of me, and I screamed, "No! And what the hell is your problem? I tried my best to ignore you. Give me a fucking clue." Then he pushed me in the chest and said, "Do you want to come out?" I've always been for equal rights, but this was the first time a healthy adult man asked me, a girl, if I wanted to fight. I take a few steps towards my fiancé, who is talking to our bouncer friend, and I say, "This guy says he wants to kick my ass," while this jerk continues to advance on me. The bouncer looks at him, gives a hand signal, and soon he is surrounded by 5 red shirts, the uniform of bouncers. He was escorted out of the bar and he, drunk, went to his minivan. I called work. I work for the sheriff's department. And let's just say they got a good tip on a sure case of drunk driving. Even though it didn't come to a fight, I think I won this fight. I used to work for the State Department of Vehicle Registration, and surprisingly, there was a fairly small parking lot in this department. The situation is like this. I left for lunch, came back, and spent a long time looking for a place to park. Finally, I saw something that would be available soon, drove up and honked, indicating that I was going to occupy it. In my experience, people usually understand everything and move on, but not this time. It was at the moment when the car began to reverse, after I'd waited a few minutes, that another car appeared on the opposite side of the parking lot. The driver looked me in the eye and then climbed right into the seat. I was very angry because I realized that I would be late for work while I was looking for a free one. When I drove past the woman who took my place, I just shook my head, and she shrugged, smiled, and mouthed, "Come on," and then ran her finger from eye down her cheek, as if mocking me for crying. I continued to work, got hit in the head because I was late, and had already forgotten about this incident until the number of none other than Miss Thief herself was called to my desk. Her expression was priceless. Keep in mind, I'm not like all employees of the department. I understand that anything happens, I constantly cancel fines and treat clients with respect because I think that both will be auctioned and will respond. And I know how shitty it is to wait all day for my turn in the registration department. I take fines off people so often that I get in trouble for it myself. So, I greet the place thief as kindly as anyone else, although in fact, even more kindly than usual. She probably thought I didn't recognize her. Her registration period had expired a long time ago, and she was owed fines of hundreds. I listened to her tearful story from beginning to end, and then I told her that she owed the full payment because she knew about the deadlines. She started arguing with me, but then, while I wasn't looking at the manager, I mouthed, "Come on," and ran my finger down my cheek, teasing her as if she were crying. At that moment, she lowers her head and takes out her card to pay the fine in full, because yes, we accept debit cards. As it turns out, it will respond.